Welcome to another Forensic Happy Hour. It has been a little while with vacations now, I now have a grandson, craziness, and obviously work. But I've kind of been begging for a while to have a superstar come into and do a show. I think everyone knows Harlan. I mean, he has pretty much contributed to the DFIR community, either through his talks, through his books, and I don't know. I can say rants because I do that as well. So we will just make sure that we try to keep your attention, because I promise you, I think that I think everyone's going to enjoy it for sure. So without further ado, Harlan, how are you doing? Good to see you, and cheers.
Cheers,
Yes,
sir.
fantastic.
Cheers. So you've been begging for a superstar, and yet you ended
You
up
know
with
what?
me.
Begging for a superstar, man. I mean, actually, it's been a long time. Obviously, I wanted to make sure I had you on here. Um, obviously, as we were talking about kind of the show, and how we progress through this, I want because you have, is illustrious the right word? I don't know, right? But your career, you've done so much. Right? This is all about community and what you've done and produced. So let's kind of go back to, I mean, really, how'd you get the bug? I mean, what were you doing? I mean, if you don't like forensics, that's cool, but I know that you did. So I mean, how did you start out in what you're doing to take you to where you are?
Okay. So while I was on active duty in the military in the mid 90s, I ended up going to having an opportunity to go to graduate school. It's not something I planned for. It wasn't like a grand vision while I was in high school or college or anything like that. In fact, it wasn't even on the radar. I was on the East Coast in the Marine Corps, and if you're on the East Coast in the Marine Corps and you reach the captain level, the school to go to, if you will, is on the East Coast. So when I got selected to attend the Naval Postgraduate School, there was a lot of wait, what? Kind of thing. What is that? And a lot of the oh, cool, kind of stuff. Nobody knew what it was. But while I got there, I kind of caught the bug on security, really, because I was doing a little bit of research on the side. I like to say that school got in the way of my education.
Interesting.
uh, and I ran into a system administrator there that had told me. I think the first thing that happened was I was doing the first thing that really kind of got me going down the road was I was doing some research on C programming, and I'd done some, basic programming, and I mean BASIC from Microsoft kind of thing. Basic program. I did some Pascal programming in high school, continued doing the basic programming in college, and even did some further programming with some college courses and things like that. So C wasn't completely new to me, but it was a little bit new. And I wanted to get a little bit better of an idea of what we were doing. So I downloaded this file. We were using Solaris Spark stations, and I downloaded this file called crack.c. which was a password cracker. But this system administrator came up to me one day and said, "Hey, you're in violation of policy." I was like, "What?" And it wasn't, yeah, I will admit, at first it was kind of like, oh no, I'm in trouble. I'm going to the
Right.
principal's office. And in this case, the principal was like a Navy admiral. So, and I was just like, but wait a minute, then my common sense kicked in. I was like, well, what policy? I never signed any policy. It turns out there wasn't actually a policy. And so we started having this, and I'm going to do air quotes again, discussion with a system administrator. And I said, so what's the problem? It's just a C file. And they said, it's a password cracker. And I said, yeah, but there's no object file. I never, look at me using
Right.
fancy words. There's no object file. I never linked
Yes.
it. Uh, and this is all with like in the first 3 weeks of the C programming course. So, um, I didn't really understand like what the issue was. So we kind of, I guess we sort of agreed to disagree and go our separate ways. And I did not endear myself to that system administrator. She was an older lady, and at one point, she left her screen logged in and walked away from the
Uh-oh.
computer. So I backed up the file that defines her desktop and redefined it as just a red desktop with no icons on it. But like I said, I backed up
Yes.
the original file, so it was still
Mhm.
there.
You're that guy.
And I was that guy. But it was with great power comes great responsibility
True
too.
story.
Yeah. So, and there was never actually a policy in fact, they didn't actually establish a policy until right around the time I graduated. It's like, you want me to sign what? See you later.
Right.
So there was that, but I really did kind of catch the bug. So after I got my degree, I went through a medical issue while I was there, and after I got my degree, the Marine Corps said, "You know what? You're kind of a broken toy, so we're gonna let you go home." I was like,
Yeah.
"Sweet! I got a master's degree. I'm gonna move back to the East Coast, and I'm gonna jump, headfirst into this thing that they call, I guess, defense contracting or whatever it was, because that's kind of typically, and still it was at the time. It's still kind of typically the way former military folks tend to go. You kind of want to stay as much as you can in the environment you're in. But I quickly moved outside of that. I was working very shortly. I was working for a company called Trident Data Systems, and that kind of, if you're kind of familiar with the early days of Black Hat, the conference, and attrition.org, Trident Data Systems is kind of tied right in there because they had a pretty big office in San Antonio where the attrition guys were from. But I was doing vulnerability assessments for the company based out of Virginia, and everybody in the building was on the government side except our team. There were like 12 of us, like sequestered off on one wall. We were doing vulnerability assessments in the private sector, and I really kind of liked the work. The sales guy was selling what we did. It wasn't like, hey, we got to sell something, so we're going to call it janitorial engineering, but really what you're doing is mopping floors. It wasn't like that at all. We were going in, we were doing the work, we were doing great work, we were doing what we enjoyed doing, and we were delivering. And so that was kind of cool for me to do for a while there. And I think what really kind of got me going was my boss, who's a retired Army colonel, had said, look, we have this product that we're using. It's a commercial product from ISS called Internet Scanner. He says, it's going to take you about 2 or 3 years of using it to really figure out what it does. And within 6 months, I was rewriting the program in Perl, because we were finding that as a commercial product, we weren't privy to the decisions it was making. We could kind of figure out the data it was collecting, but we weren't privy to the decisions. And we were finding some pretty significant disparities between what actually was there and what it was reporting. So we started working on this. I started working on this program, and we were actually running it side by side on a couple of engagements. And it believe it or not, it actually saved us at one point, because the commercial product reported a customer at one site had 21 systems with auto admin logon set. If you remember that from Windows, you could actually have it automatically log into an admin account, and the password was in plain text in the registry. Wasn't the case, and the customer knew it. So if we just published the report as is from the commercial product, we would have been, a big black eye, would have been apologizing. And I didn't want to do that. So we had the raw data, we had the evidence, and we're like, okay, we're going to go with the tools information as much as we possibly can. And that really kind of got me really focused on, kind of the security side of things, if you will. And then interestingly enough, at the same time, we had an Air Force, former Air Force OSI enlisted guy who was doing forensics, and it was double secret monkey stuff. He was behind a double locked door, and, it was one of the things I can tell you, but I have to kill you. It's like, oh, man, seriously, and then when you actually saw what it was like, oh, wow. Right. But I started getting interested in the forensics, and I found, and this is one of the challenges that I'm even seeing nowadays with a lot of folks getting out of the military, transitioning to the civilian community, is the fact that you have skill sets that you don't even realize. And so one of the things was that I learned when doing the vulnerability assessments was engagement planning, setting up teams, planning, getting everybody there on time, actually having a plan and showing up and on time, and doing professional engagement, professional delivery, was a big thing. And even coming back when you're writing the report, you have people on the team that are really, really good at what they do. And you want to make sure that they're able to deliver. So things like, go home at 4:30, be with your family, things like that. We can get this stuff done. There was none of these oh, okay, we're going to pull an all-nighter kind of thing, because that's just kind of dumb. It kind of burns people out. But I moved from there into, forensics, incident response, the same kind of thing, the planning of an incident, the conduct of an incident. Interestingly enough, many of the customers I engaged with, especially when I was at SecureWorks, many of the customers themselves were former military. So there's that instant rapport. I remember one of the biggest engagements we did, it was 150,000 endpoints across the globe. So we're dealing with Europe, Germany with all the privacy laws and things like that. It's like, talking to, my contact who's a former Navy pilot. And I was like, look, we got to get this done. The guys in Germany, literally in that particular case, the users from Germany wanted a letter of indemnity stating that the corporation, the customer's corporation, would not use any information found on the system to prosecute them. And, the guy I'm working with is like literally hair falling out, big veins popping out of his neck and up on his forehead, because we're standing there and we're watching on the EDR telemetry the bad guy move to the systems in Germany because he's completely unfettered by these artificialities. And so there was the digital forensic aspect, the analysis aspect. There's also the conduct of the engagement. And that really kind of, I found that I enjoyed doing the work. I didn't enjoy being away from my family, but I think most places I worked they were really good about this. You weren't like set on site for a month or 2 weeks. We got to the point where if we were there for 5 days and it was over a weekend, we were rotating teams out. Right. And not only was the customer good with that because they wanted fresh people, but the boss was good with that. He was like, yeah, we can get somebody in there to replace you, give you some downtime. And of course you do the things, where you work on the weekends if you have to, which, wasn't very often. There were more than a few cases where I went from one engagement to another without coming home. But the fact of the matter was, we had good team members. They were able to pick up and just run with the things. So I found that I really enjoyed the work. I really enjoyed, the challenge of keeping up with not just, changes in operating systems and applications, but keeping up with the bad guys. Right. It was like, there was more than a few times where I was just like, man, I got to tell you, this is cool. This is really some cool stuff that these guys are doing. And if law enforcement ever got this guy in an interrogation room, I just want 2 minutes to go in and like shake his hand, Right. But so seeing a lot of interesting things. I can't say that that meeting a lot of people in their worst hour was enjoyable, but at the end of it all, being able to walk away with them going, hey man, thanks. I'm still employed, I've still got my job. So, that's something to be thankful for.
Hey, on the technical side, if I can just jump back to the technical side, what really was it? Because obviously you're an author, several books that you have put out to, and so my question is really on the technical, is it something, because you mentioned with the commercial tools and you having to develop, because obviously that's a commercial tool is built under certain specifications. It has to be modified for all the different changes, and it's really not agile, right? So in going in and developing something that, one, you're able to interject on scene if you needed to, right, to conform to that event. So is that what kind of, I guess, made you go into and either writing tools that are available right now, and I'll let you go through all the tools that you have done, but is that really what spearheaded that for you? Is developing that for a certain situation because it just wasn't it just wasn't done by a commercial tool, or then now your additional books to really stimulate the community for things that you ran into?
Well, so with the tool aspect, it was kind of, especially Red Ripper, the big tool that I'm kind of known for, or if you put the accent on it the wrong way, regripper.
The regripper. Yeah. Hey, can you do the regripper? Yeah. Well.
Yeah, I get a lot of when I search Red Ripper, I find a lot of golf sites.
People need to understand registry.
Yeah.
Right.
But Red Ripper originally started as a whole bunch of scripts, and I thought I was being really coy and like really kind of cool because I was given all these scripts like really short names, like you do in Linux, where it's 4 letters, then it's 3, then it's 1 letter, and I couldn't keep track of them all. So I said, you know what, there's got to be a framework. And it just turns out that I at the time, I kind of figured out a way to create a base engine, if you will, and share it as an executable, but have, like you said, that flexibility to be able to create something instantly and drop it in place, and be able to use it And I think having that engine as an executable made it so much easier to share, with the guy sitting next to me. Give it to him and say, look, here's what you need to do. Run these tools or run this, run these plugins, and this will pull the information out. There is a certain amount of flexibility with creating open source tools and being able to do that kind of thing on the fly. A lot of the work we did with commercial tools, especially, and I won't mention its name, but one of them when I was doing, and I will never admit this, okay, in public, but one of the things I ran into when I was doing PCI analysis was the product we're using was had an internal function called isValidCreditCard, and we were finding it was missing stuff. So it's like, what's your definition of a valid credit card? And in the user forum, and one of the guys, I won't mention his name either, pointed me to a wiki page. I was like, what?
That he updated.
Well, actually, we found out that it was in fact incorrect, because one of the things the brands are very, very helpful with, you're like, can you give me some test numbers that are legit? And they're like, oh, sure. Here's how many you want? A dozen, 12 dozen, here's a bunch of test numbers we use. And I was like, oh, okay. And we found that we were missing those numbers. And it was important because we actually had a case where those credit cards, those particular brands were actually used quite extensively. And we're like, oh, we're missing stuff here. So Chris Pogue and I worked on a process we actually got with Lance Mueller, believe it or not, and got his assistants to help us out. If anybody remembers, and this is kind of the cool thing about being my age, is you can say, well, back in the day.
Exactly. Yeah, I was
right before
I was doing
say,
3.5 floppies.
Yeah, exactly. But Lance was really big as a developer for the end scripts, and he really helped us out. So we had an end script where we rewrote the function, so it wasn't a built-in function, and it was a little bit slower, but because we increased it to, I think it was a total of 7 regexes at the time. But hey, what? I'll give up a couple of minutes or a couple of hours as long as my information's complete, because at the time Visa was the big 800-pound gorilla in the room, and you don't want to cross them.
I lived in the day too, so I can speak to my age as well. Of you remember you would go in and they would check credit cards, like if you went to a store, and they would go and open up the book, and they would go through the book, and it would have list all actually credit card numbers, Visa and everything else. Yeah, that's a long time ago.
Yep.
Yeah,
a long time ago.
So
back when they had that little swipe thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, now it's just tap.
Chunk.
Now it's just tap.
Exactly.
So on with that too, especially on the artifact. You're big into on with the Windows systems and everything. Did that really did that develop because of running into those types of systems? The majority of the the instant response or the forensic side of it, to kind of bring that to the community.
Well, it all really started with. It started at graduate school. For my thesis, I was doing some modeling of network traffic at the time, and this is the mid '90s. ATM was kind of the big thing in the academic world, and so there was, one of the courses we had was modeling ATM, modeling traffic as it came from the endpoint devices to the edge of the ATM cloud, and they were to develop the buffers, the memory buffers. They were using all sorts of statistical models. So for my thesis, I needed to generate some traffic and do some, I'm going to say it again, statistical
So you start
analysis.
drinking a beer. I mean, that happens to me all the time.
Yeah.
It does.
Well, you know what? It's Bell's Too Hearted. It's a pretty hearty
yes,
IPA.
there you go.
So my tongue's already a little fuzzy. I can feel the hair on my tongue. But so I set up, it was economically feasible for us to set up Windows systems. And when I say economically feasible, yes, of course, Linux was freely available even at that time. But in order for me to get the systems that I had and set them up, they had to be Windows, in the sense that my lab was just not for my use. I won't go into the technical details, but I had 2 Cisco 2514 routers, I had a 10base2 and 10base-T networks, a 10base-5 Vampire tap. And so the servers were Windows NT 3.51. The workstations were Windows 95. And so so at that point I was really involved in Windows. But then when I moved to this role, when I got out of the military of doing the vulnerability assessments, we had like 8 guys. and all of them were guys. The women on our team were really good with network devices and firewalls. We had 8 guys that were like, I call them Linux bigots, because they were like, if you can't do it on Linux, it's not
Right.
worth doing. So they would run off to a customer that had Windows, and they'd come back
They're
with
just like,
a 2
what is
megabyte.
this stuff?
Right. They
Blasphemy.
come back with this archive, and it's like a couple of text files in it. And you're like, and a directory listing. You're like, I can't do anything with this. So there was myself, and there was another guy that had been a Windows administrator, and we hired a guy that had been a Novell NetWare administrator, and we were like trying to 99.99% of our customers have 100% Windows. In fact, I went to one location. It was an insurance company in Michigan that was mainframes and OS2 transitioning to Windows. So they had a lot of Windows, and I was like, "Ooh, OS2, yay!"
Yeah.
But so I ran into Windows. So it wasn't that I specifically said I'm only going to do Windows. It wasn't like that at all. It was everybody that I worked with had Windows. And when I got into incident response, I think once I got a call from a customer to go on site on a Saturday to a data center for a Xenix-based firewall. Other than that, it was all Windows all the time.
Yeah. I think that's, what, it's a funny, I don't want to say funny, but the word is kind of happenstance, is that, so, and you're starting out, and it's so, I mean, if you watch a lot of the shows, it's the people like, I went to school to be XYZ. I'm like, shit, I've never even thought about getting into this, but now, I can't think of anything else I'd rather do. Right. And I mean, that's kind of the same thing. So what I always tell people, it's like, you don't know what you don't know. I mean, you get into this, and then all of a sudden there's just kind of a light bulb that just switches you over. And so what is it that you can give to, say, people either starting out or thinking about it? Because my personal opinion is, especially in the security space, just because of the world as it is right now, the response as well as that, the forensic side of it is growing. There's never enough people to do it. So I mean, what kind of advice can you give to people that want to start out or really kind of propel their career?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that cybersecurity is a big field. It's a multifaceted field. So the first thing you need to do, I feel like this is an infomercial. The first thing you need to do is kind of figure out what you want to do. And the same thing was true. I look at it like the same thing was true when I went through officer training. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Marine Corps, you just, it's not like the Army where you just say, oh, I want to be an infantry officer. I'm going to talk to somebody. I'm going to be an infantry officer, or I'm going to be Signal Corps. You go to the basic school in Quantico, and at the time, I don't know if it's the same, but it was 6 months at the time. And, you compete for a job. And they have this, and then after you're like, okay, I can compete for a job. I want X. I want to be this. I want to have this role. I want to be a motor transport officer or supply officer, whatever the case may be. Then you get like 3 or 4 months into it, and they're like, well, we have this thing called quality spread where we segment everybody off into thirds, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, wait a minute, what? But the point is there's a lot of different things that you can do. For instance, I was a communications officer. And I think that really going for that, not just the initial training itself, but working in communications, which is service oriented. You're doing something for somebody else. That kind of thing really set me up for my career now. But just like the military is multifaceted, cyber itself is multifaceted. When I started doing incident response, it's what I call the Texas Ranger approach. There's one incident, so you send one analyst. And I've actually, believe it or not, hand to God right here, I've actually had people like look over my shoulder and go, hey, man, where's everybody else? And I was like, what are you talking about? Yeah. Well, and one customer goes, well, man, Deant said they would send like 24 people. I'm like, what? Why? Right. But I was like, wait a minute, how many incidents do you have? But the point is that those of us that went on site, you did everything. You did collections, you did engagement management, you did customer interface. And what I found very, very recently, like just in the past couple of years, organizations are taking a different approach. I've encountered some organizations that are just like, okay, well, we know our forensics people are good at what they do, but talking to people isn't what they're good at.
Put them in a closet, dark room.
So we're going to put them in a closet. If you read G. Gordon Liddy's book Will, at one point when he was put in solitary confinement, they pushed a plastic bag under the door and poured a milkshake into it. So that's what I kind of picture in my mind.
Yeah.
You know, some guy sitting in a closet, and you're just sending stuff under the door and he's sending it the output back, right? Or uploading it to the cloud or whatever. So they've separated things out. So there's, obviously there's the contracting side, the putting together the contract, getting everything signed, but the actual operational conduct of the engagement is broken down. And you have some people that are great at talking to people, but they're not technical. But then you have some people that, oh my gosh, they're very technical, but guess what? They can't talk to people.
So how important is that? How important is that? Because, back in the day, because I can say that too, back in the day, you wore so many hats, right? And I'm just speaking from a device standpoint, is that if it's a computer, if it's a network, if it's a mobile device, it's everything. It's like fantastic, you just do that.
Mm-hmm.
You handle that.
Yeah.
If it's, someone just, what? Someone breached this network. Oh yeah, someone just sent us. It's you. So how important is that now? As just what you were saying is the transition. Is it all comes down to money, right? It all comes down to those. Speak of law enforcement, right? Law enforcement is like, oh yeah, well you're going to do everything. Evidently, you know how to do that, so you just do it. But is it important now that things become I don't want to say prioritize, but do you do computers, you do phones, you do whatever, and then as we move into that, I mean, how important is that? Because
it's more important now than ever.
as quick as things change, as we have all these different changes, the builds that you have for operating systems, the communication and protocols, all these APIs, all this different type of stuff changes daily, especially with cloud services. So to me, and I guess it's a rhetorical question, is why is it taking so long for people to actually realize that you can't just have one person do this?
Well, like you said, it comes down to money. Yeah. They just want, and the other aspect of it is there are people that are willing to stick their hand up and go, I know all that stuff. I mean, whether it's LinkedIn or in my current role, I mean, I was looking at resumes earlier today for positions that we have, and it's got, ethical hacker, red teamer, forensic analysis, malware reverse engineering, or specifically for Corey Altide, if you're watching, malware, that there's a story behind that. And then, it also includes, other things. It's like, wow, for somebody to have all of this experience, to be good at all of it together, you're probably, I'm thinking, 275, 280 years old, So specialization is very, very important. Back in the day, there we go again, back in the day, when we're looking at XP systems, you had 3 event logs. And the registry was there obviously, but and you had a file system and NTFS, and but it was kind of difficult to juggle all that once we moved from 2000 to XP, and talk about some of the things that were there. And then when you moved into Vista, that's when we started seeing things like jump lists. And the more usable Windows has become, the more data is there.
Yeah.
That's possible. Like I liken it this way. There was a transition. Let's just skip over Vista. Let's just ignore it like it never happened.
That's like me.
But the
That's like me.
Yeah, exactly. Windows ME. The difference between Windows XP and Windows 7 was a pretty big leap. And then we go into Windows 10, and we see these leaps between builds. We've actually seen between builds of Windows 10, we've actually seen artifacts come and go. It's like, okay, look, I'm gonna go check this artifact, and it's like, well, wait a minute, where is it? Yeah, it's not there, and you're like, well, but the build is greater than the other one we looked at on this other customer site, and it's like, yeah, because they took it away. So having that specialization is very, very important. I know people that are extremely good, like really, really good at cell phones. I'm never going to say I know anything about cell phones. I mean, I can barely use my own cell phone. I think the app I use most is probably Solitaire. I don't really even check email, and my wife is like, texting me stuff. I'm like, what? You did what now? She says, I sent you a Facebook message. I'm like, I don't have Facebook on my phone. Right. So there are people that are really, really good at it, but those people are not penetration testers. And they don't, and some of the people I know that are really good at the cell phone analysis, they will never ever stand up and say that they know anything about Linux or Windows, or analyzing a Cisco device. So specialization is very, very key. And the fact is that organizations aren't willing to pay for it.
Yeah.
Or they'll say, look, I can go get somebody that says they can do everything for $65,000 a year. It's like, okay, well, where's the accountability? How do you know they can do all those things?
Yeah.
And that's when it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So on to that, it's I mean, what's the process convincing the purchaser, right? That's, identifying that person that's going to I think this is the biggest issue. One, helping them to understand the need, right? And that's difficult in itself, especially those people that are going to be deciding and writing the check. How do you go and educate those? And it doesn't have to be C-level, but I mean, how do you educate those people that are making the budgets to segment, obviously, and how important that is to make sure that you have the right people in the right positions instead of having one person doing it all?
Well, I guess I'm going to turn that question around. I've been thinking about that I've kind of stopped thinking about it, to be honest. Because the real question is why would you have to? Why do we need to do that? This is 2021, for God's sakes. Why are we having this discussion about how do security people educate other people? Well, wait a minute. Who says they want to be educated? Is there any indication that they care? One of the big I don't know if you want to call it challenges or hidden truths, or I don't know what the right term is. There's probably some 28 letter long German word for it, but Farfignugan, I don't know. But the question is, and this is something that I've struggled with for a long time, is I go on customer site or I get something sent to me. And I was just telling somebody the other day that, it used to be customers would send you, they didn't even bother taking the hard drives out of laptops. I would get this FedEx box with like 4 or 5 laptops in it, right? And it's okay, I can work with this. I got the right blockers. But when I wrote my report, there were never any questions. And it's not because I'm good. I think it's because people don't care. It's like, check the box, and then when you look at things like what's really, really been in the industry lately, very, very visible, and it's not ransomware, it's the insurance panels. With the volume of work that they're getting in and they're giving out to these other organizations and getting done, how are they able to discern quality, like correctness?
So my question is, and I 100% agree. And it wasn't necessarily a baiting question, but it comes down to they don't care. The problem is it's when there is a breach of 150 million users from that site that shit starts to matter, right? So
does it?
To who?
To who?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the problem is us as consumers. You think that people would take, but they're like, oh yeah, well I got insurance to cover it. You know what? Don't worry about it. Yeah. It's all good. And so changing that mentality is not only extremely difficult, it's impossible, because they have all of these company, if you will, safeguard for them that it really doesn't matter, right? It comes down to really the consumer of
what's the accountability?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that, now we're starting to get off into the weeds, because I can completely just get flamed up talking about these types of people that wind up doing that. So let's go back, and on the kind of the analysis side, there's a lot of people in the community. There's a lot of with the whole COVID thing, with people being at home, there's a lot of communication, people talking. What do you think it's going to be in 2-3 years when people finally go, oh, that was kind of crazy because we have everybody working at home, and how do we go in hard in these networks, and do people really care? They're on their home network and they wind up doing, and hey, it doesn't matter, we're going to VPN and do this stuff. What is the outlook, or what's it going to look like when people finally realize all the work that's been produced for people in this industry to now do the analysis on that? Exactly.
I'm really not sure where to go with that. I've never been a big proponent of predictions, end of year predictions. Like, what's it going to look like next year, because there's no accountability for that either. It's like nobody ever goes back and goes, hey, tap, tap, tap. What's going on with this? I mean, it's fun to listen to, I guess. It's fun to look at. It gives people something to look at in social media, but the fact of the matter, it really doesn't matter. I think that there's always going to be societal changes. It just so happens that COVID was a huge one. Look at me. I'm living in a community outside Richmond that's rural. I live on 19 acres. I have 3 horses and a miniature donkey. I go out and feed them in the morning, and I have a bucket that I pick poop up in. I just got fiber 2 months ago.
No, my question is more of, obviously, people that are going to be working and continue to work remote, the security issues that we have now with these large corporations that are having a remote worker. I mean, what are the security? What's that going to look like? It's hard enough in a brick and mortar place to actually deal with the security.
But you're always going to have those issues. You're always going to have the security issues, and you're always going to have them because of the mindset that we had coming into it. One of the things that we've seen with the ransomware specifically is, so an organization gets hit and you hear, oh, highly sophisticated attack, and then you realize, well, wait a minute, they had RDP open and the password was, I'm not even kidding, the password was password or password 12. I was using the original version of Loftcrack, in the late 90s, and we found that putting the word password at the top of our dictionary file really sped up the password cracking. So my point is since we came into the pandemic without the basic cyber hygiene, it's just being exacerbated.
Right. So it still comes down to,
like you
said,
they
don't care.
Yeah, right. And remote workers, we see stuff like in my current role, we see stuff all the time. Where it's like, well, there was a system stood up and it was managed and it's doing X, Y, and Z things. It's not under our management, but we became aware of it. And, it doesn't have security controls in place, and it has an easy to crack password. And we know that because we cracked the password.
Right.
And it took all of 5 minutes, with minimum processing power. So, yeah, all of these issues are made much, much worse. And to compound that is the incident response, which is, we have these great enterprise tools, EDR, XDR, TDR, XYZ, LMNOP, I don't know what you want to call it. But if somebody's sitting at home, they flick their system off. You're not collecting any information from it.
Right.
And what are you going to do? Sit there and wait for it to turn back on?
Right.
That guy turns it back on, logs back into the VPN, and all the chaos starts all over again. Alerts are going off, buzzers, alarms, jets are taking off, bombers flying. And you're like, well, wait a minute,
Yeah. So, so in talking about that kind of as a community and what I was trying to get to and to discuss, there's a lot of obviously back and forth and I'm not saying I was planning this question, but I was planning this question is, you have the community who reviews a community, those people that were in it, right? The peer review type of thing that people put things through. So explain to me your feelings on having another expert review an expert's stuff.
Personally, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
I'm not really much for peer reviews because I want somebody that's like better than me to review my stuff because that's the whole point. That's kind of the reason I wrote the books, especially the last book.
That's what I'm getting at. Let's talk about those.
Oh, okay. I see where you're going.
Hey, I might be a little bit kind of around the corner kind of this, but yes, exactly.
Yeah. So when I wrote, as I was writing the books, I just got to the point where with number 3, I was like, I'm not a 3-trick pony. I'm a 4-trick pony. I'm going to do another one. Right. And, my daughter was a teenager at the time, which she didn't want to have anything to do with me anyway. So all I did was leave my wallet out and I went to write books. And then if she got to a certain age, you leave the keys out, and you go to write the books. But when I got to the last one, investigating Windows systems, I said, you know what? I started writing these books because I wanted to have something on the shelf that I would pick up. and I was having a conversation with somebody, and they actually asked me these very basic questions. Like, when you go to the bookstore, when you go to Barnes and Nobles, and you go to the computer section, you go to the magazine section, what catches your eye? And I literally thought about it. I said, anything that says Windows and forensics on it, I'll grab, and I'll go sit down, or I'll take a look at it. Incident response as well. So I said, okay, so that's a good start. So what are the deficiencies? Where do things fall short? And I won't mention the name of the book, but I was actually contacted the authors about something they wrote in their book. And the response I got back was, well, we wrote that 3 years before it was published and never went back and edited it.
Wow.
I was like, what?
Yeah.
Because my books were worked on and they went from initial inception to publishing in a year. So, I mean, that doesn't make me special. It's just kind of like, okay, it's kind of a different approach. So this book has actually been in the hopper for like 4 years, which kind of explains why some of the content, where it was. So I wanted something that I would want to purchase. And when I got to investigating Windows systems, I said, you know what? This recipe is done of artifact tool, artifact tool, artifact tool. And anybody can put together an encyclopedia like that. I said, I want to try something a little bit different. I want to work through an image. I want to work through a process. And we've got all these CTFs out there that are excellent. The only challenge with the CTFs is they're not realistic. I never had a customer come to me with a list of 51 questions I had to answer. And I've never, ever had a customer, and I don't know anybody who's ever had a paying customer come and say, I'm going to give you this image, or I'm going to give you this laptop, but I really, the one thing I want to know is the volume serial number. I've never had that. Now, I understand how you want to have like a CTF, right? But I said that what I'm interested in is, what is the thought process? What are the pivot points? What are the decisions that you make? Why do you make these decisions? And so I thought, well, wait a minute. I could write out, this is what, here's the image, here's the questions that I need to answer. Was there malware on it? What happened? What's the time frame? Which is generally the questions we get anyway. And work through the entire process and say, look, here's my pivot points. Here's my decision points. Here's where I find something. I go, maybe not. I want to try this, or I want to look at this. And oh my gosh, look at this, this cool thing that I found. And I not only wanted to have the pivot points, but I also wanted to list out was, hey, look, when you find these things, here's how you can preserve that information and use it on your next engagement. So you can use regripper.
Make
you
sure
can write YARA.
Think of it.
Yeah.
Regripper.
And I know Corey's going to love that if he's watching this. Do that again.
Yeah, exactly.
So you can use that. You can write YARA rules, and you can write Sigma rules. And you can use, if you're doing your own thing, you can write something that says, hey, look, find this new artifact, or tell me if this new artifact exists. But preserving that data. So I wanted to preserving that corporate knowledge for later use. So I wanted to talk about all those things. And I think the only thing that I really didn't expect was, after all that writing, the book is a lot smaller and thinner than I thought it'd be.
I know the feeling. Yes, I do.
It's like, I mean, how many times does somebody say that? This isn't nearly the size I thought it'd be.
Oh, true. In a lot of not just books, right? So
right, Big
yes,
Macs,
exactly.
steaks,
Always,
pizzas.
They always shrink when you go.
Yeah, there's always shrinkage.
So I mean, is it more of a practical approach to learning rather than a static? Say, because honestly, a lot of the college or university courses are relatively static, right? You're like, hey, here's this image, find this. This is where this is, and it's kind of, it doesn't, because that's not real world, right? It's, you might go, and it's funny because people say, hey, you have to follow these rules, A, B, C, D, which is completely different, because you might start at E, and move around depending upon the situation. So what would you, what kind of advice, especially on the training side of it? Because it's not like, hey, dude, so we're all going to take you to, an RCFL right now, and we're just going to, as your university field trip, we're going to take you down there, and you're just going to sit with the analyst, and as the investigators are going through this image, and you're just going to ask him, he's going to ask you questions. I mean, how do we go in and bring in those real world, that training? Because I think that's how people that should learn, because they need to understand that it's not black and white, right? It might change, as you said. Artifacts change in between builds. They might not be there. You might have additional ones. I mean, I guess so. What kind of advice might you have?
Well, first of all, if you don't have a passion for it, don't do it. Really, seriously. If your approach is I'm going to take all these things. I'm going to take the MFT, I'm going to take the registry, I'm going to run it tool X, and I'm going to do searches, I'm going to do keyword searches, and that's pretty much it. That's not passion. So really, honestly, for your own knowledge and your own mental health and well-being, if you're not passionate about it, don't do it. Find something you're passionate about. Don't feel like you're stuck. But if you are passionate, engage. I was there's a story that I share with folks. I went to the Defense Cybercrime Conference, DCCC, in 2012. Went down to Georgia. Spent 3 days down there, and it turns out there was a guy that I know that worked in the federal environment who was also down there, and we didn't catch up until we were at the baggage claim at Dulles. Right. And we're waiting for our baggage to come out. And he says, well, hey, I've been working on this thing. It's a Windows NT system. The event logs were cleared. I've been working on it for 3 months. Like, what? Why 3 months? He says, well, I want to learn. I want to figure out how to do it myself. And it reminded me of a lesson that I got from an instructor in graduate school. Was like, if you spend more than 15 minutes on it, take a break or ask for help. And when I got home that night, as I was packing my stuff up and, taking a shower and burning my clothes, from the trip, I turned a computer on it and I sent the guy a script. And in 15 minutes, he learned something and got the job done. It's engage with each other. Don't have this thing where you've got, hey, I've got to figure it out on my own. Well, you could spend 3 months doing it and not get anywhere. And then in 3 months, be no smarter. Engage with each other.
That's a takeaway, right? I mean, that's is trying people, because I know the exact same people, and you know what? I can probably say I've done it several times. They're like going, yeah, you know what? No one else knows this. Yeah. I'm the only one. And you know what? Yeah. You just can't do that, because you'll go spinning your wheels. You can't sleep. You'll be banging your head, your wife and your kid. You know what I'm saying? Is that always take it. There's a lot smarter people than you are, right? I mean, and there are so many people that are in this, and honestly, I think that as a community, just because of people being at home, all these other things, I honestly think that it has gotten better, as in people asking for help, and I think that that's extremely important, not to internalize stuff and try to figure things out on your own, because why reinvent the wheel if, like you said, just a conversation is like, yeah, dude, here, let me help you out. So.
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is just asking the questions. I mean, people, and this is what I've gotten from teams. I've had people on teams say, well, I didn't want to ask because I didn't want to look stupid. It's like, okay, well.
Dude, I do that every day. My wife would say that.
Yeah. There's a lot of people out there that are smarter than me. And, I for one, will say, I haven't seen everything. And I actually tell people that all the time. I haven't seen everything. But what I do bring with me is maybe a view of compartmentalizing and breaking things down into digestible chunks, looking at what I do know, working with other people and passing ideas around. That doesn't make me smarter, and I'm definitely not smarter than any other people out there. But you know what? I can help, or I can find somebody who can.
Yeah, I think that's extremely important. It really, really is. So,
but you got to actually reach out.
True.
I was on a team once where they said, we had somebody say, I didn't want to reach out because I didn't want to look stupid. And what happened is that particular analyst took a lot longer on the engagement. When you're working in a consulting environment, the SOWs state 48 hours for the engagement. This one was into 64 hours, and what we were making was we were now losing money. And what that also meant was, because that person hadn't finished their engagement, that meant that when the next engagement came in, somebody who wanted to take PTO couldn't. Yeah. It's like, okay, so hold on, let me back this up. You don't want to ask a question because you don't want to look stupid, and yet here we are, and somebody's mad at you because they weren't able to take PTO because you're not done your effing engagement yet.
Right. Yeah.
So what happened to this whole thing about I don't want to look stupid?
Right. I think that's important, but you know what? It might be something because of how long it's been just an individual sport, if you will, right? Is that you always have done it instead of now understanding that there's really a team involvement. I just don't know. I mean, the mentality of, say, the old school is like, yeah, don't worry about it, I'm going to do it. But unfortunately, there's too many facets to this type of work right now that there's no human being ever that is going to be even person who specializes in it, right? I do mobile
Yeah.
phones. I mean, I do them all. Yeah, I can tell you right now, tomorrow something new comes out, and it's just
Yep.
you're like, yeah, you're done. You're done for it. And there's always going
Yeah.
to be someone that's going to be focusing on that. I'm not going
Oh,
to
yeah.
I'm not going to keep you a whole bunch longer. So I want to. Here's what I want to do. I always end with trying to figure out or to ask the guest. I mean, as a guy that's doing the investigations, what's something like an artifact that you can tell people like, man, you really got to look here. You got to look here. This is something like we talked about. It's always it depends upon the case, but what's something kind of you always kind of a go-to that you're like, man, that's cool.
Well, it's not a thing. It's not one thing. It's your process.
Yeah.
You know, you got to stop within digital forensics incident response. You got to move away from this idea of sufficiency. Like yes, we have ransomware, files are encrypted, we get it. But you got to move beyond that. You got to take a holistic approach to the system. You want to look for the artifact constellations, because those artifact constellations, especially when you're dealing with organizations, individuals, threat actors, or groups that get into systems and persist in those networks for a period of time, you want to be able to do attribution. I mean, look at some of the discussions that they've had with after Colonial Pipeline. There was all this talk about DarkSide, but it was FireEye was the first group that came out and said, look, DarkSide is RAS, and here's 5 affiliates. Right. And basically each of those threat actor groups, those named groups, they're nothing but clusters of TTPs that are all different. And we have to look beyond this idea of sufficiency. We have to go to the process. We have to be able to see those, bubble up those things, boil up those things that are inherent to, what are the artifacts left behind by actions that individuals take, whether we have EDR telemetry or not. The way I describe it is my wife and I used to ride our horses up in the Manassas battlefield near a pond. And the pond wasn't very big. And, we would see like a crane on the far side of the pond, and there's squirrels around in the area. But every now and then you'd see ripples come lapping up on the near side of the pond. And so you knew either something dropped into the pond or the crane took off without actually having to see it. And that's what the artifact clusters are all about. There are inherent traces left behind. But if we I for the life of me, I don't understand on Windows 10 why people are only focusing on security, application, and system event logs. A default installation of some build of Windows 10 many, many moons ago had 242 event log files without any applications installed. I mean, my God, there's so much information there. And then when you look at Print Nightmare, a brand new thing Print Nightmare comes out. There is a log, print service admin log, that will give you indications of attempts to exploit the vulnerability. Yeah. But nobody's looking at it. Nobody's collecting this information. It's not a thing, it's a process.
Right. And I think that's extremely important because I always ask for artifacts, but you're exactly right. That analogy is fantastic because it's event, right? But everyone's looking for that event, not necessarily right what caused the event or what else was affected by that event. And going kind of the backward, if you will, backward approach to then determine of that event. So,
one of the things we see in a lot of open reporting, especially when it comes to ransomware, is we see, right in the open reporting, it's like disables Windows Defender. Okay, how does it do that? Does it use regex or reg.exe? Does it use PowerShell? This allows us to attribute the activity, and you can say, well, it sets this value in the registry to disable anti-spyware. Great. Does it use PowerShell and the MP preference module, or does it use reg.exe? How is it done? Because we can use that for attribution. But the point is that either one of those two has a different artifact constellation that's unique to it.
Right.
And so we can use that for attribution. And one of the things I've done over the last couple of years is training for federal law enforcement and talking about how you can use digital forensic analysis to discern intent of a threat actor, sophistication, as well as situational awareness. And this is for the folks I was talking to and providing this training to. This is profoundly important, but it's also important for forensic analysis folks like that do commercial work, because it informs you where to go, where to look, but it also informs CTI. It informs detections, and I think one of the biggest problems within DFIR right now is this use of the utilization business model, because it drives this headlong rush to sufficiency. It obviates the ability to develop intrusion intelligence and go beyond just answering the basic questions and developing things like, artifact constellations that lead to things like detections, that lead to things like attribution and actionable intelligence and real CTI that goes beyond just OSINT.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's like, I know Corey Altide is out there going, bingo.
Right, exactly. Yeah, winner. Okay,
winner.
Fantastic. No, I think again, it all comes down to, and I think that a lot of visibility into and people understanding really is that, looking for those things, like you said, the constellations, looking for the attach, instead of going directly to, okay, we need to find out exactly where this is right now, rather than looking for, the after effects to bring you to the conclusion, the intent, what were they trying to do? So no, fantastic.
Yeah, boil up those artifact constellations, and the thing is, I'm with you. I'm not, to quote Forrest Gump, I'm not a smart man. But, what I do is, because I know that, I write stuff down. So I have, and I say write stuff down. It's not like a notebook. It's a regripper. It's other things like that that I can apply.
You just want me to do this every time.
Yes. Get that on video. But God, is Ryan Reynolds watching this?
I think he is.
He could probably use either one of us.
Without a doubt.
But the point is that we're never going to have all the information we want. We're never going to have it. But the fact is that we will have some information if we're not taking advantage of it.
Right.
And we're not making full use. I think Jesse Kornblum, back in about 2005 or 2006, when he was at Mantech, wrote a paper called Using All the Parts of the Buffalo. And I think that's amazing, like a mindset to take. It's like, use all the parts that you've got available to you. Just don't disregard things. Understand them and use them appropriately and build out those constellations so that you get a better understanding of what happened on the system.
Do you think a lot of analysts, and this is my last question, I promise. I don't promise, because I will probably ask you another one.
I don't mind.
Do you think that it's that those people that are trying to get into it, or those forces, if you will, getting into it, are trying to make it too easy? As in, the easy button, and here's how you do it with this tool. Dumbing down
okay.
is my thing.
What I want to believe, is that there's folks out there with a passion, and the gatekeepers are the ones that are dumbing it down, because I've worked with a lot of them, and a lot of them are still in the industry. There is no easy button, and the easy button is a process, and folks just don't seem to want to pick it up. But I think what we've got here is we've got a culture that is so deeply embedded that it's very, very difficult to overcome for any one person. You have to branch out, you have to engage, you have to be passionate about what you do and want to do better. But I think that it's not just those coming in. I think that putting it on them is incorrect. I think a lot of it has to do with the old timers like us, but I think a lot of it has to do with the customers.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Because if the customers don't care and are not able to discern quality, and I will say this, while I was at one company, I personally didn't receive the engagements, but another person received 2 engagements while we were there, where the customer came to them and said, here's a report somebody else wrote. Tell me what's wrong with it. And in one case, they actually provided the data. Other than those 2 instances, never heard of it happening again. I don't know that it's ever happened with the stuff I've done. I'd be very much interested to hear back from somebody that reviewed it and said, tell me honestly. Right. Exactly. I'm putting it out there. I wrote an entire book and had it published so people could tell me what I did wrong.
Yeah, true.
So
excellent, man. I'm telling you, we get. I think that we probably can go on for hours. I do.
Well, I still have more beer
whether
left.
or not. Yeah, I don't. So that's you gotta.
Well, I'll wait.
See, I mean, yeah, you were talking, I was drinking, right? I was listening though. I do promise you that.
Okay.
But yes, I do appreciate obviously everything that you have done, and I think that's extremely important.
Thanks.
That the information that you have put out there, not only just in your books, but obviously the knowledge that you have, especially the process and making sure that it's a team environment rather than an individual thing, is extremely important to get out. So, I do want to thank you for being on the show. I know it took a while.
Thank you very much,
It
Lee.
took a while, I know, but
It did.
But it happened. So
yes,
excellent, and
yes.
I thank you very much.
And thank you.
Okay, and the forensic happy hour. Honestly, I think we could have most definitely probably talked through the weekend. There's a lot of great stuff from the old people. Like they say, always listen to your elders. No, probably not. But make sure trust, but verify everything we say, because honestly, we can make things up. But no, quite seriously, pick up. Just all you got to do is Google, and I can tell you right now that the information that's been put out there. I know that I would say the Reg Ripper or Reg Ripper, however we want to talk about it today, it has been obviously a mainstay, and people still utilize it. It's used a lot of universities. So pick up some books, learn a lot, and make sure that you share with the community. So I appreciate everyone, and thanks. We'll be back again next week. Thanks.